The escape from Afghanistan. At least 20 people have died in a week of chaos at Kabul airport as people continue to try to flee. Those who do manage to leave express their heartbreak at feeling they have no other option.
Today is the day that a generation of Afghans have buried their dreams and aspirations in our lives.
For those who stay, there are increasing fears about what life will be like under the Taliban, particularly for women and girls. President Biden has tonight said he hopes the airlifts will end by the 31st of August. We'll have the latest live from Kabul. Also on the programme,
to extend the week.
Antibody tests are to be widely offered to UK adults for the first time to find out what natural protection people have after getting COVID-19. And Don Everly, who had huge success with the Everly Brothers, has died at the age of 84. Hello, good evening. At least 20 people are known to have died in the chaos and panic in and around Kabul airport in the week since the Taliban seized control of Afghanistan. As people continue to arrive at the airport, Britain's ambassador to the country says more than 5,000 people have been helped to leave so far. And the US has drafted commercial airlines to help with its evacuation effort. In the last hour, the US President Joe Biden said there is still a long way to go and a lot could still go wrong, but he hoped the airlift will end by August the 31st. Our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, is now airside at Kabul airport and has witnessed thousands of people desperate to get onto a flight.
1 week after the fall of Kabul to the Taliban.
It hits you as soon as you put your foot on the tarmac.
This is BBC News with the latest headlines for viewers in the UK and around the world.
This moment. Every direction we look at Kabul International Airport, Afghans and foreigners in straight lines boarding the military transport planes that are all around this tarmac, taking Afghans not just away from their country, but away from the lives that they live, the identity they cherish, leaving everything behind to start from scratch.
Today is the day that a generation of Afghans have buried their dreams and aspirations in our lives. This city to us is our home, despite its contradictions. We called it home. We raised from here. We hope that the Taliban can learn from the lessons of the past and everyone else, and we can prove that we can move away from the tanks and bullets towards a road where everyone can see themselves.
This urgent evacuation is one that no one expected, nobody wanted, and no one will forget. There are said to be more than 10,000, possibly up to 14,000 people now in this airfield waiting to board a flight to take them anywhere out of this country, foreigners as well as Afghans. There are thousands more Afghans, a crush of Afghans who race to the airport to try to get on one of these flights. Afghans have an expression when they travel, Safar Hosh, may your journey be happy. Some will be so relieved that some of them will have spent days outside waiting to get inside. They are trying to get through. It's taken some people days to get in because of the people who are pushing outside at the gates. Little children, families, not knowing what kind of life they're heading to.
Lise Doucette at Kabul airport. Well, while thousands of Afghans have been trying to leave, many of the millions who are staying are anxious about the future, particularly for women and girls. The Taliban have said that female rights will be respected within the framework of Islamic law. But many people are concerned that women will be stopped from going to work and girls from going to school. Our correspondent, Sakana Kamani, sent this report. And just to warn you, it contains some distressing images.
When the Taliban took over Kabul,
Many residents were terrified. But Rowena, a young female journalist, decided she should go and talk to them for her YouTube channel. That was the last video she uploaded. She's unsure if the group will approve of her working or not. For now, many offices have told female employees to stay at home. Many female professionals have fled in fear. It's hard to imagine the Taliban accepting even small freedoms like this, filmed before the takeover. I really love my job and I want to carry on working, she says. I hope the Taliban will allow me to. Otherwise, I'll have to leave the country and go abroad. The last time the Taliban were in power in the 1990s, women weren't allowed to work, girls couldn't go to school. Even now, they defend punishments like lashing and stoning adulterers to death. Today, under Taliban rule, you do still see some women out and about in Kabul, though significantly fewer than before. Many are simply too afraid to step outside. So far, here, they haven't been ordered to wear the burqa or to stay at home unless accompanied by a man. But no one's sure if that will last. I've been trying to speak to any of the women here, but all of them are extremely reluctant to go on camera. That's not something entirely new, but one woman did tell me while she was deeply anxious about the future, she didn't feel safe saying anything critical about the Taliban. Even without new laws being imposed, fear is changing the way many women dress. No one's buying jeans anymore, says this shopkeeper. Instead, they're buying headscarves and more conservative gowns. Many are deeply suspicious of the group, but today the Taliban told female employees at Kabul's mayor's office to return to their jobs. Durkhana was one of a handful that turned up. They just said, you have to wear the hijab, she tells me, but I already dress like this anyway. The Taliban have always been vague in their commitments to women's rights. In some areas, they've banned girls going to school beyond the age of 12. Young Afghan women have been amongst those taking part in scattered protests defying the group. Fawzia Kufi is a prominent campaigner and was a member of the team negotiating with the Taliban.
A lot of women actually contact me. They come to see me or message me. They're trying a way out or looking for something different. Not only in terms of security, but in terms of hope for a better country. They don't have it anymore. But in the meantime, I think I'm very proud to see them getting ready to resist.
Many women worry, whatever the Taliban say now about being able to work or go to school, they'll grow increasingly strict once the international focus comes to an end. For now, it's a time of deep uncertainty. Sikandar Kamani, BBC News, Kabul.
The Prime Minister Boris Johnson will convene a meeting of the G7 group of leading nations this week to discuss Afghanistan in the wake of the US and allied troop withdrawal. The government says efforts to evacuate British people and eligible Afghans are improving and that more than 1,700 people have been airlifted in the last 24 hours. The former Prime Minister Tony Blair has described the US withdrawal as tragic, dangerous and unnecessary. Here's our political correspondent, Chris Mason.
He's the former Prime Minister most often remembered for the war in Iraq.
Good evening.
Before that came this moment in 2001, shortly after the September the 11th attacks.
Military action against targets inside Afghanistan has begun. I can confirm that UK forces are engaged in this action.
2 decades on, chaos, desperation. Tony Blair says Afghanistan's being abandoned. It's tragic, dangerous and unnecessary, imbecilic to walk away.
Many people, as a result of what's happened in Afghanistan, are going to have a deep doubt as to whether we can be relied upon. And the trouble with this decision is that our friends are now anxious, and those people opposed to us feel heartened by it, and that is not a good place to be.
It's a conflict that cost the lives of 457 UK servicemen and women. Thousands more were injured. As veterans asked themselves if it was all worthwhile, the man who first sent them to Afghanistan says yes.
The fact is the country did have a chance, and it was really our own internal short-term politics in the West that has driven, in the last couple of years, us to put at risk what we gained. And I think it's only now that we're realising in this moment of crisis exactly how much we gained and how foolish it is to lose it.
It's managing that crisis here at Kabul's airport that remains the focus for British soldiers and the government. The Taliban, says one minister, are making that a little easier than it was.
They appear to now be marshalling people into separate queues for the US evacuation and for the UK evacuation, and that's making a big difference to the size of the crowds outside the UK gate and allowing us to process people much more quickly.
Thank you all. I mean, we are overwhelmed by this response.
This is the welcome some of the Afghan families who've made it to the UK are receiving.
Right, shower gel, I've got another box.
A synagogue in Hertfordshire collecting donations.
A lot of us have families where this actually happened only 80 odd years ago, where they literally left where they were with the clothes on their back. So it's our turn to now be the people to help.
Young lives prepare for new lives here. The future of the country they called home, so uncertain. Chris Mason, BBC News.
And let's return to Kabul and join our correspondent Sikandar Kamani. And there's been so much focus on Kabul itself. What do you know, Sikandar, about what's happening in other parts of the country?
Well, an uneasy sense of calm in most of Kabul, aside from the airport, really, and in much of the rest of the country. But we're getting reports of fresh clashes to the north of Kabul in the province of Panjshir. That's the one province yet to be captured by the Taliban, where fighters calling themselves the Resistance are based. They include the former Vice President Amrullah Saleh and the son of the legendary anti-Taliban fighter Ahmad Shah Massoud. Now, the Taliban had been attempting to negotiate the surrender of the province, but yesterday saw fierce fighting in a number of nearby districts. And the Taliban tonight said they had sent hundreds of their fighters towards Panjshir. Sources in the resistance telling me they managed to repel them from the gate of Panjshir. Panjshir has always traditionally been a bastion of anti-Taliban resistance, so it's definitely a situation to keep monitoring in the coming days.
All right, Sikandar, thank you very much. Sikandar Kamani in Afghanistan. Now we turn to the rest of the day's news, and the latest government coronavirus figures show that there were 32,253 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. That means on average there were 32,484 new cases per day in the last week. The most recent figures show almost 6,500 people are in hospital with the virus. 49 deaths were recorded in the last 24 hours, with an average of 98 deaths a day in the last week. In terms of vaccinations, more than 87% of adults in the UK have now had their first jab, and more than 76% have had both. Well, meanwhile, antibody tests are to be widely offered to the public in the UK for the first time in a new programme that aims to find out more about what natural protection people have after getting coronavirus. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, is with me. So what more do we know about this, Fergus?
Well, Jane, think of antibodies as soldiers in your immune system on patrol to protect you from coronavirus. And you recruit antibodies either through vaccines or through infection. We know that 9 in 10 adults in the UK have some level of antibodies, but we don't know how big an army you need to fully protect you from COVID. This should help tell us. Now, in this study, if you test positive for coronavirus, so you're currently infected and you opt in, then you'll be sent 2 home finger prick antibody tests. Up to 8,000 people a day in the UK will receive them. Now, the first test to be done immediately will show what level of antibodies you built up through vaccination. The second test, to be done 28 days later, will show what boost of antibodies you've got from that recent infection, because it takes 4 weeks for them to build. Now, people will be texted their results, so for the first time, you'll be able to find out your antibody status, and it will really help scientists calibrate what level of protection there is from a combination of vaccination and natural infection. That'll be really important for deciding things like booster doses. A limited number of booster doses for the most clinically vulnerable are likely to be done from next month, but it now seems less likely that all over 50s will be offered booster doses, at least for now.
All right, Fergus, thank you. Fergus Walsh. A government minister in New Zealand has admitted that the country's strategy of trying to eliminate coronavirus may no longer be viable. A nationwide lockdown is in place until Wednesday because of an outbreak of the Delta variant. New Zealand has recorded about 3,000 cases and 26 deaths since the pandemic began. The authorities in Haiti say more than 2,200 people are now known to have been killed by the huge earthquake that struck earlier this month. Funerals have been taking place this weekend, with search and rescue workers still looking for about 350 people who are still missing. Millions of people on the east coast of the United States have been urged to prepare for one of the most powerful storms in years. A state of emergency has been declared in parts of New York State as Tropical Storm Henri hits. Winds of up to 75 miles an hour are forecast, with torrential rain expected to cause flash flooding. Now, a busy day of sport. Let's get all the latest details on that from Carthy Gnana-Seagram, who's at the BBC Sports Centre. Hi, Carthy.
Hi, Jane. Thank you very much. Golf fans have been treated to a fascinating final day at Carnoustie, where Sweden's Anna Nordqvist has won the Women's Open, the most lucrative of the 5 majors. Nordqvist was level with Denmark's Nanna Kers Madsen as they played the final hole, but it was the Swede who kept her cool to win, while England's Georgia Hall finished in a tie for second place, and 21-year-old Scottish amateur Louise Duncan impressed again. Jo Linsky reports.
From Scotland, Louise Duncan.
This has been the week of Louise Duncan's life. She's 21 and a student in Stirling, here in contention at Carnoustie on the last day of a major. As an amateur, she couldn't even win the prize fund, and around her on the scoreboard she faced so much quality. Anna Nordqvist last won a major 4 years ago, but through the weekend she's been inspired. Chasing her at the top was Georgia Hall, a former Open champion, who at 5 under for the day knew she'd come close to history. No English woman has won it twice before. But out in front, Nordqvist stayed firm. She'd win it by a single shot, and on the final hole.
Anna Nordqvist is a major champion again.
And though she's from Sweden, she had some home support. Her husband Kevin's from Dundee and brought the noise from down the road. Nordqvist had won her 3rd major on one of golf's iconic courses. For Hall and Duncan, the dream can wait another year. Jo Linsky, BBC News.
It's time to pop out of the room if you don't want to know today's football results, as Match of the Day 2 and Sports Scene in Scotland follow soon on BBC One. Romelu Lukaku scored his first goal for Chelsea on his 2nd debut for the club as they beat Arsenal 2-0. The Belgian striker first joined Chelsea as a teenager and returned to the club 10 days ago for £97.5 million. Despite it only being the 2nd weekend of the Premier League season, there's already been something of a Harry Kane saga troubling Tottenham's fans, but the England captain returned to play for them after his extended summer break as Spurs beat Wolves 1-0. Manchester United and Southampton drew 1-1. Hibernian are top of the Scottish Premiership table after a 2-2 draw with Dundee. Hearts and Aberdeen also drew. Reigning champions Rangers defeated Ross County 4-2 and Dundee United beat St Johnstone 1-0. Just 3 weeks after winning the women's BMX racing gold medal at Tokyo 2020, Great Britain's Beth Shriver has won the BMX World Championship title. The 22-year-old made a strong start, which meant she avoided a crash just behind her. Shriver had needed to crowdfund £50,000 to help her to compete at the Olympics. She's now the first woman to win Olympic and World Championship BMX gold medals in the same season. And that's all from the BBC Sports Centre for now, Jane.
Carthy, thanks very much. Don Everly, one half of the Everly brothers, has died at the age of 84. Don and his brother Phil had a string of hits in the late 1950s and 1960s and are credited with influencing musicians including the Beatles, the Bee Gees and Simon and Garfunkel. David Silito looks back at his life.
Dream, 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 dream.
The Everly brothers. In the years between Elvis joining the army and the arrival of the Beatles, Don and Phil ruled the airwaves. Donny, here on the right, got his first break on the radio when he was just 8 years old.
They had a 15-minute radio show on Saturdays, known as Little Donny, and I used to get to read the commercials.
Be sure, if you have corns and calluses, send for Foster's 30-minute Wonder Corn and Callus Remover. $1 will bring you a big 1-ounce bottle.
Kathy's Clown, written by Don, was their biggest single. But as the 60s progressed, fashions changed, and the close harmony began to break down.
Being a duet in the music business, and especially the kind of duet Phil and I are, close harmony and nose to nose right up on stage there every night when we were working. That takes a lot of strain on the relationship.
The brothers split. 10 years later, there was a brief reunion, but Don, liberal, outgoing, was in many ways the opposite of his more conservative brother. They went years without speaking. But when Phil died in 2014, it was a reminder of what they could only do together. The heartache and harmony of the Everly brothers.
Don Everly, who's died aged 84. And you can see more on all today's stories on the BBC News channel. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news wherever you are tonight. Bye-bye.